Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reed stepped aboard the USS Intrepid to whispers and dismissive glances. The crew saw only a diversity hire assigned to signal monitoring, a desk job for someone who didn't belong on a warship. But when Captain Harrington opened her classified file, his hands began to shake. The USS Intrepid cut through the Pacific swells with the confidence of America's most advanced destroyer, her steel hull bristling with weapon systems and sensors that represented the pinnacle of naval engineering. As the ship prepared for multinational exercises with Allied fleets, the crew buzzed with the anticipation that came with high-stakes operations. Lieutenant Commander Sophia Reed's arrival aboard the Intrepid was met with barely concealed skepticism from officers and enlisted personnel, who had already formed opinions about her assignment based on assumptions rather than facts. "Great, another diversity assignment," muttered Lieutenant Coleman as he watched Reed report to the officer of the deck. "Just what we need during major exercises, someone who probably got her rank through politics instead of performance." The sentiment was echoed throughout the ship's corridors, where Reed's assignment to signal monitoring was seen as evidence that she lacked the qualifications for more demanding duties. Her quiet demeanor and methodical approach to her work were interpreted as signs of uncertainty rather than professional competence. "She seems nice enough," said Ensign Cho, the ship's youngest officer, "but signal monitoring? That's not exactly a challenging assignment for a lieutenant commander." What the crew failed to notice was the way Reed's sharp eyes cataloged every detail of the ship's operations, how she absorbed information about security protocols, crew dynamics, and tactical procedures with the systematic approach of someone trained to see patterns that others missed. Reed accepted their dismissive treatment without complaint, understanding that respect had to be earned rather than demanded, and that her true mission required her to remain underestimated until the moment came to reveal her actual purpose aboard the Intrepid. While performing her assigned duties with meticulous precision, Reed conducted her own assessment of the ship's readiness crew, competence, and security vulnerabilities. Her training had taught her to gather intelligence through observation rather than interrogation, and the Intrepid's crew provided her with a wealth of information simply by treating her as invisible. Her real mission remained classified at levels that exceeded the clearance of everyone aboard the ship, except Captain Harrington, who had been briefed only on the operational necessity of Reed's presence, not on her actual qualifications or the true nature of her assignment. The Intrepid's first tactical exercise was designed to test the crew's readiness for the upcoming multinational operations, but it quickly became apparent that something was seriously wrong with the ship's performance. Communication systems experienced unexplained delays. Navigation data showed subtle inconsistencies, and weapons targeting systems produced errors that shouldn't have been possible with properly functioning equipment. "What the hell is going on?" demanded Commander Bradley, the ship's executive officer, as the exercise devolved into chaos. "Our systems are performing like they're being jammed, but there's no external interference." Boss, Reed watched the exercise from her position in the communications center, her trained eye recognizing patterns that the ship's officers were missing in their frustration with the technical failures. The problems weren't random. They followed a specific sequence that suggested deliberate sabotage rather than equipment malfunction. Sir Reed said quietly to Lieutenant Coleman, who was coordinating communications, "I'm seeing some anomalies in the signal patterns that might explain the system failures." Coleman's response was dismissive and condescending. "Reed, just focus on your monitoring duties. The technical problems are being handled by people who actually understand these systems." But Reed had already identified the source of the problems and was quietly documenting evidence that would prove crucial to the ship's mission. Reed's analysis of the communication intercepts and system anomalies revealed a sophisticated cyber attack that was being conducted from within the ship's own network. Someone with access to classified systems was systematically degrading the Intrepid's capabilities in preparation for a larger operation that could compromise the entire multinational exercise. Her counterintelligence training allowed her to recognize the signature of an adversary she had encountered before, an operative known only by the code name Javelin, whose previous attacks on military installations had resulted in significant intelligence losses and operational failures. The attack pattern matches known Javelin methodologies, Reed noted in her encrypted report to Naval Intelligence. Recommend immediate security sweep and implementation of countermeasures. But her official channels for reporting the threat were limited by her cover assignment, and the ship's officers were too focused on the immediate technical problems to consider the possibility of deliberate sabotage. Reed realized that she would have to take more direct action to protect the ship and its mission, even if it meant revealing capabilities that were supposed to remain hidden until the appropriate moment. Captain Harrington's decision to review Reed's personnel file was prompted by curiosity rather than suspicion. Her quiet competence and professional demeanor had impressed him, and he wanted to understand why such an obviously capable officer had been assigned to what appeared to be a routine monitoring position. What he found in Reed's classified service record left him stunned and questioning everything he thought he knew about his newest crew member. The file revealed a distinguished career in naval intelligence and counterintelligence operations, with commendations and decorations that marked her as one of the Navy's most effective covert operatives. Navy Cross Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit. Harrington read aloud in his cabin, his voice growing more amazed with each citation. Successful operations in Jakarta, Seoul, and the South China Sea, specialist in counterintelligence and maritime security. The final entry in Reed's file explained her presence aboard the Intrepid. She had been assigned to identify and neutralize a suspected enemy operative who was planning to disrupt the multinational exercises through sabotage and intelligence gathering. "Jesus Christ!" Harrington whispered as he realized that the technical problems plaguing his ship were exactly the kind of threat that Reed had been sent to counter. Captain Harrington's call for an emergency senior staff meeting sent ripples of concern through the Intrepid's command structure. The ship's department heads gathered in the wardroom, expecting a briefing about the technical problems that had plagued their recent exercises, but they were unprepared for the revelation that would follow. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrington began, his voice carrying the weight of classified information that would change everything about their mission. "I need to brief you on the actual reason for Lieutenant Commander Reed's assignment to this ship." The assembled officers looked confused as Harrington gestured for Reed to join him at the head of the table. Her transformation from quiet observer to briefing officer was subtle but unmistakable. Her posture straightened, her voice gained authority, and her eyes carried the confidence of someone accustomed to command. For the past 2 weeks, Reed began, "I have been conducting a counterintelligence operation aboard this ship. The technical problems you've experienced are not equipment failures, they are the result of deliberate sabotage by an enemy operative who has infiltrated our crew." The silence that followed was deafening as the officers absorbed the implications of Reed's words and realized that their assumptions about her role had been completely wrong. Reed's briefing revealed the scope and sophistication of the threat facing the Intrepid and the multinational exercises. The enemy operative identified by the codename Javelin had been systematically compromising the ship's systems in preparation for a larger attack that could compromise the security of Allied naval forces. Javelin's previous operations have resulted in the loss of classified intelligence and the compromise of multiple military installations. Reed explained, displaying classified photographs and intelligence reports that documented the operative's capabilities. The attack pattern we're seeing aboard the Intrepid matches Javelin's known methodologies, subtle system degradation designed to create vulnerabilities that can be exploited during critical operations. Lieutenant Coleman, who had been dismissive of Reed just hours earlier, now listened with growing respect and concern. "Ma'am, how do we know that Javelin is actually aboard this ship?" Reed's response demonstrated the depth of her analysis and the sophistication of her counterintelligence work. "Because the sabotage is being conducted from within our own network using access codes and system knowledge that could only come from someone with legitimate clearance and detailed knowledge of our operations." Reed's investigation into Javelin's identity required her to analyze the behavior and access patterns of every crew member who had the technical knowledge and security clearance necessary to conduct the sabotage. Her approach was methodical and discreet, using her background in behavioral analysis to identify potential suspects. The operative we're looking for has advanced technical skills, detailed knowledge of naval systems, and the ability to move freely throughout the ship without attracting suspicion, Reed explained to the senior staff. Her analysis had narrowed the list of suspects to 3 crew members, each of whom had the access and opportunity necessary to conduct the sabotage. But identifying the specific individual would require more direct investigation that could alert Javelin to the fact that his operation had been discovered. "We need to be careful," Reed warned. "If Javelin realizes that we're on to him, he could accelerate his timeline or attempt to escape before we can apprehend him." Captain Harrington's decision to give Reed full authority to conduct the investigation marked a complete reversal in how she was perceived aboard the ship, from unwanted assignment to essential mission commander. Reed's plan to identify and capture Javelin involved setting a trap that would force the operative to reveal himself through his own actions. She proposed feeding false information through different channels to see which piece of intelligence would trigger a response from the saboteur. "We're going to create 3 different versions of our operational plans," Reed explained to the senior staff, "each with subtle differences that will allow us to trace any intelligence leaks back to their source." The plan required the cooperation of officers who had initially questioned Reed's presence aboard the ship, but her demonstration of expertise and authority had transformed their skepticism into professional respect. "Ma'am," said Ensign Cho, who had been selected to assist with the operation, What if Javelin doesn't take the bait? Reed's response revealed the depth of her experience in counterintelligence operations. Then we'll know that he's more sophisticated than we initially assessed, and we'll adjust our approach accordingly. But based on his previous operations, I believe he'll be unable to resist the intelligence we're offering. The success of Reed's trap would determine whether the Intrepid could complete its mission or whether Javelin would succeed in compromising the multinational exercises. As the Intrepid approached the rendezvous point for the multinational exercises, Javelin's sabotage efforts intensified dramatically. Critical systems began failing in sequence, creating cascading problems that threatened to leave the ship defenseless during the most important naval operation of the year. "We're losing weapons control," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the Combat Information Center. "The targeting systems are showing ghost contacts and false readings that make accurate fire control impossible." Reed recognized the escalation as a sign that Javelin was preparing for his final phase of the operation, a coordinated attack that would disable the Intrepid during the exercises and potentially compromise the security of Allied vessels. "He's accelerating his timeline," Reed told Captain Harrington during an emergency consultation. "The system failures we're seeing now are designed to create maximum chaos during the exercises when our vulnerabilities will be exposed to Allied observers." The implications were staggering. If Javelin succeeded in his mission, the intelligence compromise could affect not just the Intrepid, but the entire Allied fleet, potentially exposing operational capabilities and vulnerabilities to hostile intelligence services. "How long do we have?" Harrington asked, his voice tight, with the strain of commanding a ship that was being systematically disabled by an enemy within his own crew. Reed's assessment was grim, but decisive. "Based on the pattern of system failures, I estimate we have less than 6 hours before the ship becomes completely vulnerable." Reed's trap had worked perfectly, with one of the 3 false intelligence reports triggering a response that revealed Javelin's identity. The operative was Petty Officer First Class Martinez, a communications specialist whose technical expertise and access to classified systems had made him the perfect infiltrator. "Martinez has been aboard this ship for 8 months. Reed reported to the senior staff long enough to map our systems and identify our vulnerabilities. His background check was clean because his recruitment by hostile intelligence occurred after his assignment to the Intrepid." The revelation that Javelin was a trusted crew member who had been working alongside them for months sent shock waves through the ship's leadership. Martinez had been well-liked and professionally competent, making his betrayal even more devastating. "How do we apprehend him without alerting him to the fact that we've identified him?" asked Commander Bradley, understanding that a premature move could trigger Martinez to accelerate his sabotage or attempt to escape. Reed's response demonstrated the tactical thinking that had made her successful in previous counterintelligence operations. "We're going to use his own methods against him. I'm going to feed him false information that will draw him into a position where we can apprehend him without giving him the opportunity to complete his mission." The plan required precise timing and coordination, with Reed taking personal responsibility for the most dangerous phase of the operation. Reed's confrontation with Martinez took place in the ship's communications center, where the saboteur had been lured by false intelligence about a critical system vulnerability that required immediate attention. The encounter would test all of Reed's training and experience in dealing with hostile operatives. Petty Officer Martinez, Reed said as she entered the communications center, her voice carrying the authority of someone who knew exactly what was happening. "I think we need to discuss your recent activities aboard this ship." Martinez's reaction was immediate and telling. His hand moved toward a concealed weapon, while his eyes searched for escape routes. But Reed had anticipated his response and positioned herself to block his access to both weapons and exits. "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am," Martinez replied, his voice steady despite the obvious tension in his posture. Reed's response was calm and professional, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Javelin, your operation has been compromised. The system vulnerabilities you've been exploiting have been identified and countered. Your mission has failed." The use of his operational code name shattered Martinez's cover completely, and his transformation from loyal crew member to enemy operative was immediate and dangerous. The confrontation that followed would determine whether Reed could complete her mission or whether Javelin would escape to threaten other operations. Martinez's attempt to draw his concealed weapon was met by Reed's superior training and preparation. Her years of counterintelligence work had taught her to anticipate the reactions of cornered operatives, and she was ready for his desperate attempt to fight his way out of the situation. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Reed said, as she disarmed Martinez with a precision that spoke of extensive combat training. "Your operation is over, and there's nowhere for you to run on a ship in the middle of the Pacific." Martinez's response revealed the depth of his commitment to his mission and the sophistication of his training. "You think you've won, but my work here is already complete. The damage I've done to your systems will ensure that this ship fails when it matters most." Reed's analysis of Martinez's sabotage had prepared her for this possibility. "Actually, Javelin, your sabotage was more obvious than you realized. We've been tracking and countering your activities for the past week. The system failures you think you've created have already been repaired." The revelation that his mission had been compromised from the beginning was a psychological blow that completed Martinez's defeat. With Martinez in custody, Reed's team began the process of fully restoring the Intrepid's compromised systems. Her analysis of the sabotage had been so thorough that the repair process was completed within hours, returning the ship to full operational capability, just as the multinational exercises began. "All systems showing green across the board," reported Lieutenant Coleman, his voice carrying a respect for Reed that had been completely absent just days earlier. "Weapons, navigation, communications, everything is functioning at optimal levels." Captain Harrington's relief was evident as he watched his ship's capabilities return to normal. "Outstanding work, Reed. Your operation not only neutralized the threat, but ensured that we can complete our mission without compromise." Reed's response was characteristically modest, despite the magnitude of her achievement. "Sir, this is what I was trained to do. The crew's cooperation made the operation possible." The multinational exercises proceeded flawlessly, with the Intrepid performing at levels that exceeded expectations and demonstrated the effectiveness of American naval capabilities to Allied observers. Reed's successful counterintelligence operation had not only protected the ship, but had enhanced its reputation among international partners. The Allied commanders are impressed with our performance, reported Commander Bradley during the post-exercise debrief. Several have requested information about our training methods and operational procedures. Reed's mission had achieved its objectives completely. Javelin had been neutralized, the ship's security had been restored, and the exercises had proceeded without compromise. But perhaps most importantly, she had earned the respect and trust of a crew that had initially questioned her presence aboard their ship. "Ma'am," said Ensign Cho, who had assisted with the investigation, "I learned more about real naval operations in the past week than I did in 4 years at the Academy." The revelation of Reed's true mission and capabilities had transformed the Intrepid's crew from skeptical observers to genuine admirers of her professional competence. Officers and enlisted personnel who had initially dismissed her as a diversity hire now sought her guidance and respected her expertise. "I owe you an apology," Lieutenant Coleman told Reed during the post-mission celebration. "I made assumptions about your qualifications based on prejudice rather than evidence. Your performance over the past week has been extraordinary." Reed's response demonstrated the grace and professionalism that had characterized her throughout the mission. "Lieutenant, we all make assumptions based on limited information. The important thing is being willing to change those assumptions when presented with new evidence." The transformation in crew attitudes was complete and permanent. Reed had proven that competence and capability were not determined by appearance or assumptions, but by performance under pressure and the ability to deliver results when they mattered most. "She's the best officer I've ever served with," Ensign Cho told his fellow junior officers. "I hope I can learn enough from her to become half as effective as she is." Captain Harrington's official report on Reed's performance was unqualified in its praise for her counterintelligence work and its impact on the ship's mission success. Her operation was classified at levels that prevented public recognition, but within naval intelligence circles, her achievement was legendary. Lieutenant Commander Reed's operation aboard the Intrepid represents the finest traditions of naval intelligence, Harrington wrote in his classified report. Her professionalism, expertise, and dedication to mission success exemplify the qualities we seek in our most sensitive assignments. Reed's promotion to commander came with assignment to Naval Intelligence Headquarters, where she would develop new counterintelligence protocols based on her experience aboard the Intrepid. Her methods would be studied and implemented throughout the fleet, enhancing the security of naval operations worldwide. For Reed, the most meaningful recognition came not from official commendations, but from the respect and trust she had earned from the Intrepid's crew. Her mission had been successful, not just in operational terms, but in human terms, proving that prejudice could be overcome through competence and character. "The crew of the Intrepid taught me as much as I taught them," Reed reflected during her departure interview. "They showed me that respect once earned can bridge any gap created by assumptions or prejudice." Her experience aboard the ship had reinforced her belief that the Navy's strength came not from its technology or weapons, but from the professionalism and dedication of its people. The crew that had initially questioned her presence had become her strongest advocates, proving that excellence could overcome any obstacle. "I'll miss serving with them," Reed said as she prepared to leave the Intrepid. They're the finest sailors I've ever had the privilege to work with. Reed's success aboard the Intrepid marked a turning point in her naval career, leading to rapid promotion and assignment to increasingly sensitive and important positions within naval intelligence. Her methods and techniques became standard training for counterintelligence operatives throughout the fleet. Commander Reed has redefined what we expect from our intelligence officers, said Admiral Patricia Hayes, Director of Naval Intelligence, during Reed's promotion ceremony. Her combination of technical expertise, operational capability, and leadership under pressure represents the future of naval intelligence. Reed's assignment to develop new counterintelligence protocols ensured that her experience would benefit the entire Navy, with her methods being implemented on ships and installations worldwide. Her work would protect countless operations and personnel from the kind of infiltration that had threatened the Intrepid. The techniques that Commander Reed developed during the Javelin operation are now standard procedure for all high-security naval operations, explained Captain Torres, who oversaw the implementation of Reed's protocols. Despite her professional success, Reed remained focused on the human impact of her work rather than the recognition it brought her. Her experience aboard the Intrepid had reinforced her belief that the most important victories were those that changed hearts and minds rather than just completing missions. The crew of the Intrepid showed me that prejudice is just ignorance waiting to be corrected by evidence, Reed explained during a lecture at the Naval War College. When people see competence and character in action, assumptions become irrelevant. Reed's story inspired other women in naval service to pursue careers in intelligence and special operations, proving that capability mattered more than gender in determining success. Her example showed that excellence could overcome any barrier created by prejudice or assumption. I hope my experience encourages others to focus on performance rather than perception, Reed said. The Navy needs the best people regardless of what they look like or where they come from. Reed's story became a case study in naval leadership schools, demonstrating how competence could overcome prejudice and how assumptions could blind people to exceptional capability. Her techniques continued to protect naval operations years after her mission aboard the Intrepid, proving that her contribution extended far beyond a single successful operation. The crew members who had served with Reed carried her example throughout their careers, becoming advocates for merit-based evaluation and inclusive leadership. Her legacy lived on in every operation that was protected by the protocols she developed, and every sailor who learned that respect must be earned through performance rather than assumed through rank or appearance.